Hey, and welcome to another episode of Nutanix Weekly, one of the many podcasts that we like to call Content with Context here at XenTegra. I'm your host, Phil Sellers. I'm the practice manager for Modern Data Center. We call it Modern Data Center because we know that not all of the things that run your business run in a colo or in that room down the hallway anymore. It's probably hybrid in some way, some AWS, some SaaS, a little bit of everything contributing to how you run your infrastructure. So um, I'm joined today again with two great guests, two great co-hosts from Nutanix. We've got Jirah Cox, who is a principal technologist. Jirah, how you doing?
Good, man. Good. Doing well. Appreciate the invite back again.
As always, it's a standing invite, right? We've also got Ben Rogers, a enterprise sales engineer. Ben, how you doing?
Good. Glad to be here. And as Jirah said, glad to be invited back. So always a pleasure to hang out with you two. And just to let the listeners know, I learned just as much from this hanging out with you two as probably they do listening to all three of us. So I always appreciate the time and the invitation to sit in on the podcast.
Well, it's funny. I think there's a lot of learning going on, Ben, and it's good to point that out. Like I'm sitting in Durham, just across the railroad tracks from Nutanix headquarters here on the East Coast. I've been here a lot over the last few months, just doing different activities with customers, with training internal, spending a fair amount of time here, and a lot of that is learning. So I don't care if it's bringing a customer here for an executive briefing, which we did last week, or if it's hardcore training, 8 hours a day. I always leave with something new because there's just that much going on inside of Nutanix, inside of the product. And I'll be honest, today is a great, and we couldn't have asked for a better intro for what we're going to talk about today, which is the brand new release, a long-term support release of Nutanix AOS version 6.10. This came out, last week? Is that right, Jirah?
Sounds correct. Yep. Well,
Yep.
last week as we were talking about it, you and I now.
That's true. This probably isn't going to release for a few weeks. So came out on October the 8th. So early October. And we were talking a little bit about this, but long-term service releases, short-term service releases, it's a release cadence for Nutanix, but basically LTS and 6.10 is a long-term service release. It's going to be supportable for a longer period of time. But what goes into one of these LTSs, Jirah? What are we getting with 6.10?
Sure. With 6.10, you're getting, it's kind of you can think of it almost as like a roll-up release, a little bit like, we've seen those for years in like the Windows Server patching cadence, right? Where you have patches that catch up, as giant releases, things that have shipped beforehand as well. Now that's sort of trickling out to lots of stuff. Like I was patching one of my desktops here at the house the other day, and it was like, do you want some early stuff first, or do you want to catch it, as it kind of goes mainstream? So I would think of these more like a mainstream release, like they're intended for all customers to roll out all new clusters with, to patch existing clusters up to, right? And therefore really everyone, for all purposes, for all workloads, ready to go. And then of course we do put out some intermediate releases, right, that we call STSs, that are for like if you need a new feature faster, then of course those are there for you as well, and those STSs eventually get merged into a future LTS like this.
So the short version of that is new toys.
Yeah. Totally true. Yeah, very much true. So, new for everybody, right? So, a couple of some kids have been playing with these toys and testing them for us earlier on, and now toys for everyone.
No, that's funny. Like, my son grew up as the YouTube generation, so much to my surprise, he enjoyed watching other kids unwrap and play with new toys. That was one of the video crazes for his generation. So this is kind of our version of I can't remember the kid's name now, but kind of those YouTube videos of playing with new toys. We get to
Yeah,
talk about it here today.
trying to think about how those kids out earn all three of us combined
Oh yeah,
doing that as like a 6-year-old on YouTube, playing with toys.
No
absolutely.
doubt. No doubt. I would like to take a moment here to kind of, talk about my learning curve a little bit since I've been here at Nutanix. You know, I'm going to age myself here. To get enhancements out of an environment, you used to have to throw a lot of hardware at it. And there was really no software change that could be made. It was basically, throw hardware at it. Today, specifically with this first area we're going to talk about now, kind of segueing into the storage capabilities, this is where you see Nutanix, and I'm kind of fascinated by this. And being 54 years old, to get fascinated by something that I've done for 30 years is quite an achievement. But I'm starting to see where our software engineers can play with the our AOS and man, bring goodness and performance out of just, changing some gears within the software itself. And since I've been here over the 2.5-year period, I've seen them make several enhancements to the software part of the equation that has really brought some enhancements, disk sharding, some of those things. Jirah can speak a whole lot more of what we brought to the table, but it just amazes me when you look at some of the features and capabilities that we bring in these LTS releases that are software driven, that bring performance to the platform, where it used to be you had to wait to refresh hardware to get some of those performance enhancements. And so I'm very fascinated by that and what our company is able to do from a software level to get as much power and performance as they can out of the hardware stack.
Well, I think you hit on one of the age-old sort of conflicts inside of IT is it the software or is it the hardware? And as infrastructure guys, we've probably always thrown more hardware at the problem to try and solve it. But really, there's a lot of magic that can happen inside the software. And I think that's one of the shifts that we see in where we're at today as an industry, is that the software is the defining difference. And that's the story of hyperconverged. That's the story of cloud, breaking down silos, making things scale, and using industry standard Lego building blocks to do that. And I think it's a great point. It is something that we're seeing tremendous progress, I guess, as time comes on with the capabilities around performance. So, as we dig into this, it's not only higher performance, but there's some density changes that come along with this too, right? We're able to get some new limits in place. I mean, is there anything maybe beyond what's here in the blog post, Jirah, that you could share in terms of those density capabilities and things like that?
Yeah, so which is a neat point to highlight there, right? How 6.10 really catches up what has already been brought by AOS 6.6, 6.7, and 6.8. So yeah, of course, if you're anywhere in there in the middle, then yeah, there probably is new stuff here for you around larger nodes. I know one of the key things that we're highlighting, of course, is even larger nodes that can support things like nightly snapshot rates, right? So if you only need once a night snapshots and less than, like, say, continuous data protection, then yeah, the nodes can get truly large these days. This blog post doesn't call out specifics on that one, but that, of course, is an area you can imagine that we're always looking to make continual improvement on, right? To give our customers better RPOs, larger density. Larger density translates into better financials, right? Better economics around, denser hardware refreshes, fewer nodes to manage, and helps keep pace from a storage platform level. Really, I would say, of what CPU vendors are looking to do as well, right? Like
Yeah.
they're much more investing into how many cores can we fit into this node, not let's get you more nodes to hit a certain kind of core count, right? So as our core counts per node really push the limits of what some of us even enjoy as like an HA boundary. How many baskets do I want for my eggs here? Then like 128 cores is kind of like wow, that's a really interesting design non-limit, right? So then we want storage to not also be the constraining part below that either.
Absolutely. And I think, that takes us into the idea of, what is truly enterprise ready, right? We're we're talking about eggs in a basket. We're talking about, risk at the end of the day. And so, one of those risk factors is, does the software running on this platform, is it supported? Is the ISV I'm working with going to support it? So LTS is really important when it comes to that ecosystem of things that run on Nutanix. A lot of vendors don't certify for STS releases. And so as we talk about that and enterprise readiness, that's a huge factor for 6.10. This will be something that we can expect many ISV softwares to be certified against. And so this is another huge step forward where we're getting tons of new capability, speed, density, all of these things, but also that enterprise level support. And that kind of takes us to point number two, enterprise readiness with AHV. AHV's been around 10 years now. And
we were there for the birthday party.
A birthday, yeah. So we saw that at .next earlier this year. It's come a long way, and there's tons of goodness in here. Let's kind of cover off some of the things from an enterprise readiness standpoint.
Yeah, so the post calls out, a new one. It's new. It's new now to really all customers, whether you were on a release that already had this feature or not. So on-demand cross cluster migration. That's a mouthful, but a great thing, right? The ability to move running VMs, of course, from one cluster to another, which in our standard Nutanix designs are sort of always shared nothing, right? Those clusters might not share anything other than maybe the network that your guest VM is attached to. So that ability to move a running VM from one cluster to another, whether that's across a rack, across the aisle, or across town. All now possible for all customers, whether you were on a release that had it before or not. Storage optimizations, of course, helping to place VMs more intelligently onto even clusters where they want to run, and then VM placement as well. And then security, and then you really touched on it, Phil, but that ecosystem, right? That nothing exists in a vacuum, right? So much of what our customers experience when they want to move on to Nutanix and move on to AHV involves looking at that vendor matrix of like, what else do I use to help manage and monitor my environment, help make my job easier as an administrator, as a platform owner. And and it's really a delight, and thanks to our alliances team for all the work they've put into this. When I sit with customers and look through the matrix of like what supports Nutanix and what can they keep that they already own as they migrate over, and that list gets longer and longer by the day. It's really quite really delightful to see, and it's wonderful for our customers.
Yeah, Ben, you come from that customer background. This is a huge deal, because what you don't want as a customer is to call into support and be like, sorry, I can't help you because X. This is a huge deal. What's your perspective as you kind of look at this enterprise support, and how it's changed over time?
So, there's a paradigm shift kind of going on in the industry to this microservice mentality.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really where we're shining right now, as far as like it is a platform where AHV is just a service within that platform. So, you were talking about our ecosystem. Right now we have the ability to look at customers and go, the platform is the foundation for the microservices that you want to run. So if you want to run AHV and you want to run containers with that, we can do that. If you want to run AHV and you want to run our NUS, our unified storage services on that. I mean, this is what we're bringing to the table. And I think that's what's making it enterprise ready is we're not just a hypervisor. We're not just a storage component anymore. We're really bubbling up goodness that allows you to manage files, manage unstructured data, manage ransomware, and looking at the content of your unstructured data, Kubernetes, container management, deployment, application, database management and deployment now. So there's a lot of things when you say enterprise readiness. And what I go back to is that, Nutanix at the heart is a cloud platform that's based on microservices that live in that platform. AHV is one of those services amongst the other ones that we just talked about. And that to me is what defines the enterprise readiness.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point. It is a platform. I'm a huge proponent of calling it a platform. It's not just hyperconverged. This is so much more because the services that run on top of it are really valuable to your business. One of those hugely valuable services is really around disaster recovery and resiliency. Um, we're raising the bar again with 6.10. New replication resiliency features, near sync for volume groups and consistency groups, metro multi-site DR, which is really interesting. And that's one I would want to talk a little bit about. And then also multi-cloud snapshot technology, which I think is really interesting when you start talking about and thinking about cost-effective ways to handle DR.
Yeah,
Jared,
spot
want to
on.
weigh in?
Yeah, so I mean, it's great to see NearSync come now to volume groups and consistency groups. That's our way of saying our 1 minute replication threshold. So we
Mhm.
can now get that data offsite within 1 minute, which gives a ton of protection to the business. And really, I usually describe this as sort of like for the most complicated apps our customers ask us to host, right? So like into the either multi VM groups or multiple vDisk groups, right? Where I need like the right order fidelity of like these snaps occur in the right way, preserving that data right as it was flowing down to disk, or even flushed down to disk if I needed app consistency as well. Helping those most complicated applications right get offsite and get protected. And then the Metro multi-site is such a neat way to phrase this ability now to have a workload that runs with sort of two sites, keeping it in full lockstep, right? Full synchronous replication, and then also still have a third site that catches an asynchronous replica as well. So I can now have, zero data loss recovery among two sites and still have a whole third site participating in that that's asynchronous as well for even like a sort of a near far recovery and availability model for my critical data.
Yeah, Ben, as we talk about multi-cloud snapshot technology, this to me is really interesting because for the first time you're leveraging not Nutanix necessarily as the destination for that replication. You're actually directing it to S3. I mean, that seems like it's going to be a significant cost savings, and for certain use cases, but not all, maybe worth stepping back from really aggressive sort of RPOs or RTOs.
Well, when he was describing this, man, healthcare came to my mind with active active and a tertiary backup. I mean,
Yeah.
that's screaming healthcare infrastructure right there. So absolutely right. Again, I just think this goes to our commitment to our customers to have world-class replication and DR services. Again, I don't want to minimize the hypervisor with this conversation, but when customers go in the cloud, they're not looking at the hypervisor. The hypervisor is just part of the service that's delivered. They're looking at more of things like how do I replicate my data? How do I protect my data? How do I give my data governance so that it stays in the realms? And these are all the things that we're delivering now.
Yeah.
And I agree with you, Phil, that like that, I think it speaks to how many customers want nowadays to have their first foray be like, how do I use cloud for DR?
Mhm.
Right, for my workloads? It's such a juicy target in their minds of I get to close this entire whole other data center that has always kind of been like sort of a boat anchor for procurement of like I get to buy two and only use one of them. Well, now I get
Yeah.
to spend less on that second copy, right? Because I can rent it in the cloud, keep the running cluster very tiny, right? The Pilot Light Nutanix cluster, and then let
Right.
that offload data into other cloud native storage, right? So it's sort of the more direct and most effective way to use cloud as a DR target. Cost effective, technology effective, accomplishes the mission as well. So I think it's really exciting.
Yeah. And honestly, I mean, doing some architecture training that I mentioned earlier, it's great to say multi-site, Metro DR here. There's still a lot of planning that goes in on that, but it's really cool technology. I worked in a place where we did metro clustering and stretched VLANs between our two data centers, and it is nirvana state of disaster avoidance, right?
And I'm sure it's super easy to get there and very easy to maintain all of that.
Hey, I will say the software helps a lot when it comes to that easy to maintain thing, right?
True.
Yeah,
It's not a part of a solution that we all work together to provide, right? It's not a
100%.
one click, turn it on, instantly now you're Metro, all the things.
Yeah, we do in Phil, I totally agree with you. It's not the easiest thing in the world, but we do make this process easier for our customers where they have less gears to have to turn. Before it was networking, storage, compute, blah, 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 blah. With this solution that we're bringing, there's always going to be networking. That's the first thing customers have to deal with when they go in the cloud is how do I get my networking to catch up with what I'm doing on-prem? But the back end of how you set the volume groups up to be replicated and ensuring and monitoring of that replication reporting, we do make those things easier because we bring that into the platform.
And it's a great point, guys. Like that wasn't a knock on software at all. You guys make it easier for sure, but that networking piece, the plumbing is still pretty hard. And especially as an infrastructure guy, I didn't even sleep in a Holiday Inn Express last night. Like I got no claim to networking whatsoever. So it's one of those things where, yeah, we definitely have to have our partners help. And there's a lot of planning that goes into making this magical. But as we talk about networking, that's a great segue into number 4 here. Nutanix Flow Network Security offering enhanced security, connectivity, and cyber resilience. Jirah, I'll throw it over to you.
If you hadn't made the segue, I was going to. Yeah, for sure. It was an amazing tee up. And I was also just making the point of as it's a solution that we all drive towards consultatively, right? That it's not just one product, right? But the partner in it matters, the integration matters, the operational practices matter. And to both of your point, yeah, we definitely can help make the networking part a little simpler as well by offering our own SDN stack as well to be that network stretched layer when your workloads require that, right? There's also obviously lots of ways you can do it from private data center to private data center, do it in the fabric, do it in your top rack, do it lots of different ways. You can do it purely in software, and you almost need to when one of those clusters is going to be in the cloud, right? Where there is no top rack that you can go touch. So now with some of the maturity brought to Flow Network, the Flow networking stack, right, on both the security and the networking side of things, some really great stuff to call out is, of course, there's new dashboard. Again, it did come out in 6.6, but now everyone gets that by just doing their regular, standard, I would almost say boring Nutanix updates. You just get new functionality, get new features on the cluster you're already running. Really good stuff that, it calls out here, protecting your data, safeguarding your network, and of course, helping you as the admin who has to kind of own and wrangle all of this, ensure more operational security more easily. But then also, Flow networking security goes next gen now, brings the controller for all of that into Prism Central, along with basically the entire stack, whole platform, right? More and more management done through Prism Central. So fewer places to go to do things as part of your day job. But also really now cool is that Flow Networking can also now help you do more security oriented operational activities, right? Like traffic monitoring, traffic mirroring, policy management, scaling to clouds, right? Stretching your networks out there when you need to, and really just helping you stay in a posture to stay on the alert against threats in real time in your environment.
It's interesting here, and I'm not one to brag, but I have to brag on my managed services team. So we implemented both Flow Network Security and Flow Virtual Networking in our data centers. And I guess it's been maybe a month and a half ago. Our colo provider had an outage at the facility where we host in Atlanta. So during that outage, we had customers affected, obviously, that we're hosting for. Well, because of what we've done in the networking stack with Flow, we were able to fail over and get our customers back online in 7 minutes. So shout out to my managed services team, also to the development team at Nutanix around that. It's a perfect example. And that's one of the things that we always say is a differentiator for us here at XenTegra. We're running the same things you're running as a customer. And so we can talk about our experiences. If that's not proof, I don't know what is. But shout out to my managed services team because, those calls come at really bad times in the middle of the night when you're not, probably the most awake
Yeah.
and you're getting out of bed to respond to these things. And these guys did an amazing job and had the customer back online in 7 minutes. Just an amazing kind of illustration of how good this technology is today.
No, that really is fantastic. Kudos
And
to
you're not even
everyone
talking
involved.
about the money that you save them for
Oh,
only being down for 7 minutes.
no, not at all. I mean, there's implications financially, operationally, everywhere in the stack there's implications here. But, there was an investment of time to configure this, to set it up, make it interoperable with our physical networking infrastructure. But, it also saved us, to a great degree during a DR situation, a real world DR situation. So this is proven technology. Um, we probably didn't set out to prove it on Saturday morning a month and a half ago, but I'm glad that it worked out well for us, and it's a success story today.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest sections with this is our existing customers that have come from Prism Element into Prism Central and have, I don't want to say gone through some growing pains, but have gone through some growing pains. This really is starting to show the commitment of Nutanix to our, Prism Central and getting more services in there and, trying to get to that. I don't want to say one pane of glass, but a centralized environment where you can look at all the microservices in one application. And so, I'm glad to see that we're committed to Prism Central and getting more services into there. And I'm glad to see all these STSs, LTSs are bringing us a little closer to that.
Yeah, 100%. Well, and you gave us another great segue, Ben. I have to say, last up here is Streamline Management and Automation, just one of the other services delivered. And we've got a number of new things here. But again, building on what's been released in the incremental things, fine grain RBAC is a big one that came with 6.8. But let's talk a little bit about, streamline management and automation. Jirah, I'll throw it to you.
Sure. That's definitely part of it, right? More detailed, more configurable RBAC controls, of course, helps the entire organization, right? Operations teams, security teams, networking teams. As we, help our customers have a path to streamline and sort of democratize all operations, we know that not everyone's there yet, right? So when I need to have just a certain team that can only do certain operations, that kind of a management model and policy engine helps with all of that. But also, even things like data-centric policies where I can tag a VM or apply a category to it in the PC parlance, but with that category, have that do things like affect my VM replication status for offsite, affect who can see it, affect my data reduction on it. Do I want to apply compression to it? Do I want to have it be RF2 or RF3 from a data resilience perspective? All these things that I can now do via policies that before I had to do sort of as the admin and making careful and purposeful placement decisions, right? But now I can really change virtually anything about the environment from one state to another just by changing my policies that apply to that object. So that allows for a lot of simpler planning, faster execution, and sort of simplifies the stack, right? Before, where if I would have needed multiple, say, like data stores for things like data reduction versus richer coding versus RF2 versus RF3, now I can have just one and have policies that apply to the workloads where they need to. For access control, we of course are still rolling out v4 APIs across the board. This calls out how the ones in this release are release candidate, so they're able to be inspected, and you can start planning on moving operations automations. There we go, to using those v4 API endpoints. That'll be great. And then a long time asset, it's so great to have fully solved now, is that ability for NGT installs or guest tools. You can now install them really any which way you want to, right? Ansible, Terraform, SCCM, PowerShell, any which way you wanted to. You can now spray out the NGT installation itself, as opposed to needing us to do it for you. So you had to script us versus now we can give you the payload. You install it on your own VMs. That allows more customers to use that in more places more easily, right? So making the guest tools kind of a lighter touch, more broadly applicable installation is fantastic, right? Lets our customers solve problems the way that they want to. And then we
Yeah,
also did bring out this new extra small Prism Central. It's travel size for your convenience, right? So when you need one at the edge, it's tinier and smaller, so that when you want this sort of Prism Central based management construct, which is kind of really the direction we're headed across the board, I can now put one of those really anywhere, and it can be a right sized workload for the environment that it wants to run in.
that's an interesting one to talk about too, because as we pack more goodness into Prism Central, it really hasn't significantly grown in a while. Yeah, it's another thing to point out, like the high end, large or extra large, is still kind of consistently the same. So kudos to the team developing in that same footprint, but adding and incrementally pushing things forward. Um, you know, we must be busting at the seams, I guess would be the right way to say it, in our current sizing for Prism Central. So, but there's so much goodness that is being built in. Um, Ben, as you talk to customers and stuff in the field, let's talk about that robo use case that Jirah mentioned, like the extra small Prism Central, the robo. That's somewhat of a newer, I guess, subscription style for Nutanix. Are you seeing a lot of interest in it? Because I know I am with customers I talk to.
On the robo side, not so much on the Prism Central. I think where a lot of people are gravitating towards the robo is just the multi microservices that we can run there, as far as like it doesn't have to be just VMs or containers or unified storage. It can literally be all 3 or 4 of those services running at the edge. And then AI is becoming a big thing. We're talking to customers that are in kind of a retail market, and they're looking for having GPUs on the edge to do some AI for uh, buyer trends. If they see things in the store, being able to interact with the buyer. So we see a lot of interest on our robo just being multi-serviced and being able to do it in one cluster instead of multiple clusters per a service.
Yeah, and that echoes some of what I'm hearing with customers too. They want to do more analysis at the edge rather than transmitting everything back to a data center or to the cloud provider. Um, and Robo is a compelling offering for a lot of customers with branch locations and retail locations. And so it's really a good way of repackaging all the great things we've talked about into a very cost-effective package for the edge. So
Yeah.
if you're listening and you're not sure what we're talking about, you can find information online for NCI Edge. It's kind of a robo-based per VM packaging for all this Nutanix goodness we're talking about, and certainly reach out to your Nutanix or XenTegra rep, and we'll help you get connected with information if that sounds like something that could help you in your business.
Now, listeners, I'm going to ask this question from a customer standpoint because I've just going through a deal with this and learning about it myself. If I understand the robo licensing, you pretty much buy it per VM. So you buy it, I think, like in 25 VM packages, but it doesn't have to be per site. So you could buy like a pool of VMs and then spread those across how many ever sites that you would have. So, like example, if I've got 3 sites and they've got 25 VMs between those 3 sites, I can buy a 25 impact licensing and use it across those 3 sites. It don't have to be a license per site. If I understand the way we've done that correctly, Jirah and Philip, please keep me honest there as I'm regurgitating that back.
There are some parts that I don't devote a lot of brain cells to memorizing. I look up when I need to. You've got more detail at your fingertips there than I do at mine, so I'm going to defer to you, Ben.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of flexibility based on what we've worked, and again with the competitor with a V name. Do we want to call it Voldemort? Maybe. I don't know, but that was a terrible joke. They've eliminated their per VM licensing, so it's one of those things where it's definitely a compelling offering that we're talking about more and more. So
Yeah, for sure.
rollups. I think it's time to roll up this podcast based on roll-ups and 6.10. So I am not hitting on much with my jokes at this point. I'm just getting blank stares back. So I think that's a sign that we probably just need to cut this one off today. Guys, 6.10 is a huge milestone though, and we're going to have this version out for a while. So there's a lot of great things to make use of. Is there anything that sticks out for either of you that's been in the last STS releases that 6.10 delivers for the mainstream customer that they should absolutely check out?
Almost hard to avoid it. Live migration improvements. I mean, migration is part of what we do all day, every day, for sure. And then better, easier, faster, more accessible software-defined networking as well. Just it can be such a problem solver, kind of like your excellent example there, Phil. When you need it, you really, really need it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think some of the granularity with our RBAC is important for security organizations and being able to get people in the system. So now I'm seeing more junior engineers having access to Nutanix, where before, because the limit of the RBAC, we couldn't do that. So just now being able to bring more junior people in because you have more of a stricter RBAC policy, that's huge for security organizations. It's huge for us because it brings more people into our ecosystem to learn how to use it. And these junior engineers now become senior engineers one day. And so very grateful to see that come into it. And I've had some customers thank me for bringing that in.
Yeah. Well, guys, I definitely appreciate your time talking about AOS 6.10. I don't think I actually said the name of the blog post. So blog post is Elevate Your IT Infrastructure with Long-Term Support Release, Nutanix AOS 6.10. This was written by Alan Waters. I think he's on the Nutanix tech marketing team. So shout out to Alan and the entire tech marketing team. We appreciate what you do because it lets us do what we do. So shout out to you and the team. On behalf of Jirah and Ben, I want to say thanks for spending a little time with us this afternoon. Guys, thank you for your time. And for everyone listening, we'll catch you on the next episode. Hope you have a great evening.
Have a good one.